go with the current month, I have decided to revisit one of my favorite games. Before I get started, I would like to say, for those of you who might go to the comment sections and begin to start a war over whether or not Christians should partake in Halloween, I would urge you to go watch our previous video. We did a podcast couple weeks ago, depending whenever this video comes out. It should be titled something about the Modern Warfare 3 beta and should Christians play horror games. We already went over that in that video, and I don't want to reiterate it here. That being said, I would like to dive into one of my all-time favorite horror games of the entire genre. Resident Evil 4 originally released January 11th, 2005 for the GameCube. The game was remade in 2023. For footage that I used the remake in this since I, 1, don't own the original and have no way of recording it at the moment, and 2, the remake recently came out and is just phenomenal in my opinion. I did play the original many years ago as one of my first horror games, and it immediately became a favorite for me. For the sake of consistency, I will also only be talking about the remake while I make this video. Resident Evil 4, when it first released, was a hit success, solidifying itself as a classic shortly after launch and helping revolutionize the horror genre. The previous installments of Resident Evil were usually, I'm pretty sure they were the top-down camera view, and Resident Evil 4 was the first to have a third-person, over-the-shoulder type view of a horror game that I know of. The tank controls in the original made it very difficult to play, but I'll get into that later when I get into some of the gameplay and memorable moments of the game. Diving in, let's talk about the game itself. I will leave the story out of this video, instead going more into the gameplay, characters, and explaining a little bit about the characters and some of the memorable moments that I find in the game, so, aka bosses and certain things. The story will be left mostly to my brother if he ever decides to make a video on this one, but also I would highly recommend that you do pick up this game and play it for yourself instead of me going through the entire story. I will definitely have heavy spoilers in this just as I go over the bosses, certain events in the game, in multiple areas. Ultimately, the final story thing will be up to my brother if he wants to make one. I'll start with my first section, which will be a brief character overview. We'll look at the characters in the game briefly. Some of them I left out, but I'll mention that in a little bit. The first character being the playable protagonist, Leon. Leon is an agent from America sent to the land of Spain, which is unnamed in the game. The game revolves around Leon trying to rescue the president's daughter, who we will examine in a bit. Leon has a strange personality, switching between serious sometimes and making jokes other times going on. While you progress through the game, Leon speaks with another agent through the phone that helps guide Leon through the area. Eventually, Leon gets infected by being captured by a character named Mendez, which I don't talk too much about because not much is known about him, or at least not much that I know about him. The parasite that plagues the village is what he ends up getting infected by, and begins to experience side effects throughout the story, such as falling unconscious and hallucinating. For sake of spoilers, I will say he begins to change his attitude after finding Ashley, and having a sort of character development arc later in the story. Overall, Leon is an excellent character. I think he fits the story well, and the tension sometimes breaks with him coming up with some of the one-liners that people know in the game.
La campana. Hay que obedecerla.
Él nos invoca. Tenemos que servir. Al Lord Sadler Todopoderoso.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Ashley. Ashley Graham, are you in here?
Just let me go.
Listen. Easy with that. My name's Leon. I'm here in the president's orders and... that went well.
Ashley is the second character I'll talk about. She serves as the sidekick for 2/3 of the game after being rescued. You end up going through the first part of the game without her, and then you end up having to rescue her. She does end up getting captured multiple times, causing you to be away from her for some parts of the game, but ultimately she's typically there for about 2/3 of the entire game. She often gives her own insights to things going on, constantly talking to Leon, going back and forth. Ends up going through her own arc where she becomes less afraid and starts trying to help out more, because you end up having to use her for certain sections that require her to either hold a lever, turn a wheel, or whatever, especially one part in the castle where it's extremely annoying, where you have to protect her while she spins the wheels to raise the bridge before you can go through. She goes through a whole character arc, and her back and forth between Leon and their relationship grows as the game goes, and it's honestly great storytelling that you should go check out for yourself.
You can stop right there, Leon. Wouldn't make me use this, would you?
Well, after 6 years, that is one hell of a greeting, Ada.
You don't seem surprised. Interesting.
Try using knives next time. Better for close encounters.
Not a bad move. Very smooth.
So who are you working for this time?
Oh, Leon. You know I don't work in town. Leave the girl. She's lost no matter what. You walk away now, and who knows? Maybe you'll live to meet me again. And then I might get you that greeting you were looking for.
You think I'm gonna give up that easy?
Right. How about we continue this discussion another time?
Is a character I don't know too much about because I don't do much research outside of the games. I know she pops up in the second game, which I have played, and her and Leon seem to know each other. They typically give banter back and forth between each other and don't typically like each other, but Ada ends up helping Leon multiple times during the game, especially in the final fight where she ends up saving Leon right before he gets fully turned into the same thing that the villagers are.
Over here, stranger.
Who's that?
The next character is a fan favorite of people who play this game. He's very memorable. He's the merchant, even though not much is known about him. He just kind of randomly pops up in the game at different places, mysteriously being able to slip around the entire village without having any issues, which is strange in itself. But usually you find him next to these burning purple pillars, and he acts just as a merchant or an upgrader. You can upgrade your weapons and has weapons to sell. You can sell items to him, such as the valuable jewelry that you find around, and can use that money to upgrade weapons or buy new weapons or get different attachments for your weapons. I think he's a really good character because it adds to the mysterious nature of the area you're at.
I'll make it cheap for you. Feeling better?
Yeah. Seems like it worked.
Bad news? All we've done is buy you some time. The suppressant's effects will wear off all too soon. You ready to go?
Don't worry about me. Ashley is the priority.
In that case, we know what we have to do. Then come, Sancho Panza! Let us rescue the Princess Dulcinea!
You're gonna hurt yourself.
Hey, that was my lance. Okay, we hurry, I get it.
So we have Luis Sera, who his character just kind of shows up as well, but I think he's a really good character. He mostly serves as a comic relief to the player as you go through the game, because when he usually shows up, it's usually him and Leon arguing and him making some one-liner to Leon. He originally was an Umbrella agent, which, as the game goes on, he ends up going through an arc and explaining he regrets the research he has done with Umbrella, where they uncovered the parasite in the underground and were using it as a testing ground until things just kind of hit the fan and the parasite got widespread. He appears multiple times, even helping with a boss fight and an extremely strange section later on in the game that I'll go over later. But overall, Luis is a good character in my opinion who fits the game pretty well.
Phew. I'm beat. Makes you appreciate tech like this.
I don't get you. Why risk your life like this? You don't know us.
I told you. It makes me feel better.
Be straight with me for once.
Los Iluminados. I was working for them.
See? There you go.
Helping the two of you doesn't make up for it. I know that. But still, I don't want anyone else to get hurt.
In that case, you better get serious.
Harsh words for a squire. We're out of that hellhole. The fresh air is calling our names. Por fin! Gus, if we made it all this way, you know it means we're almost...
Almost what?
Luis! Long time no see, rookie.
Major Krauser? What the hell? Why?
Recovering stolen goods. And killing a few rats along the way. Easy work.
Ashley, it was you.
You catch on quick. Didn't I teach you? Knives are faster. Not good. We are just getting started, rookie.
With that, I'll segue into the next character I'll mention, which is Jack Krauser, who is a crazy veteran who seems to know Leon. I don't know too much about their backstory, but there seems to be some hatred between the two of them. Leon trained under him, but he constantly mentions that something happened a few years ago that was horrible, and Krauser has not forgiven Leon for it. He causes a lot of issues with Leon, including kidnapping Ashley and leaving towards the island later on in the game. But eventually you'll make your way to that island after rescuing Ashley, and Dill deal with him there. He is an extremely good character in my eyes and is definitely the best boss fight in the game, and I will go over that later on in the gameplay section.
A most warm welcome to my castle. Such a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance, Mr. Kennedy.
Who the hell are you?
Me? Oh, please, call me Ramon. And allow me to get straight to the point. I would like you to hand the girl there over to me. Now.
Yeah, fat chance, Ramon. The girl's just fine. With me.
Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kennedy. How novel. Nonetheless, you see, the girl must be ours. With a girl as the very source, your United States and then the entire world shall overflow with his grace. For that is the iron will of my master, the most holy, Lord Sadler. So then, you will comply, yes?
Never.
You heard the lady.
How unfortunate. Do make sure our guest feels at home, now that he has chosen death.
Leon?
Just stay close.
This character I would like to talk about is Ramon, who is probably my favorite character in the game just because his attitude, I guess, his constant talking and being annoying. He honestly is like one of those typical villains like Handsome Jack where he just doesn't stop talking or annoying the player. He's the owner of the castle and was born into a rich family that lived in that village until Umbrella caused issues with the parasite. He doesn't do much to fight the player himself at first, instead sending his lackeys and setting up traps, eventually dropping you into this giant pit where there's a bunch of spikes and Leon barely survives it. He gets increasingly more annoyed the further along you go until you reach the final fight area where he finally gets fed up, you shoot him, and then he comes back as a nasty squid creature. Overall, he's a good character and a very good antagonist.
Prostrate yourself.
This is our holy body. Our divine providence ensued. Such profound blessing for all. Lost blood. Welcome, my children. I am Osman Sadler, the speaker for our Lord.
Tell someone who gives a shit.
The character that I'll mention that I know things about is Osmond Sadler, who serves as the main villain of the game. He is a cultish leader who worships the parasite as his god and can control the people of the town. You first see him through hallucinations as Leon. He doesn't appear himself until the third act of the game after defeating Salazar and reaching the island. Again, he holds the main parasite, which allows him to control the town and the other parasites, as well as do some crazy, like, transformation magic trick stuff.
You need to listen to me.
What is that? Over there?
Pursue them.
The lost lambs are escaping.
Perseguirles.
Deliver unto them salvation.
He even attempts to control Leon and Ashley, causing Ashley to almost shoot him, but she manages to resist.
Such profound blessing for all. Lost blood. Welcome, my children. I am Osman Sadler, the speaker for our Lord.
Tell someone who gives a shit.
Foolish lambs, why do you deny grace? Now, abandon your body. Obey. Obey the voice of our Lord. Sweet child, do not resist. Pray forgive these wicked sinners. My faithful disciples shall deliver to you your penance. Now, child, you need not be afraid. Submit your body and release yourself from fear.
Sadler, you bastard.
Not showing up like crazy actually works to his mysteriousness and of his character because it builds him up very well and slowly to the end, up until the final fight where he finally gets angry and has to transform to try to kill you because you removed the parasite so he can no longer control you. His final fight is really good. I'll go over it in detail further later in the gameplay section, but of course it ends in Resident Evil fashion where you shoot a rocket at him. The game does a great job building him up until that final area where he truly becomes the villain and makes him a great antagonist for the story. I mentioned Mendez earlier, but not much is known about him. I didn't do too much, or I couldn't find much research in the game on him like you can the other characters. He kind of shows up as the Mr. X character of the game, where he's just, at first, just a nuisance. In this section, I'll talk a little bit about how the game looks because of beauty and environment. The game is gorgeous with the remake. They did a really good job making the environment look very good. Like, you can look around and just be in awe at how the area looks, especially in the village parts where you're deep in the woods of that area. A lot of times you're in adrenaline-fueled combat, which makes it difficult to kind of look around, but if you ever get the chance to, you really should just look around and enjoy the gift that the people have of the graphic design and the programmer team. Overall, the game looks incredibly amazing and adds to the experience as you look around and just enjoy the game for what it is. Outside of the battles and adrenaline-fueled combat, it's always nice to just kind of look around for a bit while it's still quiet. Now we'll get into some of the gameplay and memorable moments of the game. I'll start by talking about the camera. I mentioned earlier that it's one of the first to be a third-person camera. In the original, it was extremely annoying because it was a tank control type game where you have to kind of stop to turn and look around, and then the aiming was inverted for some reason. But this works very well with the game because you can get jump scared from behind. It's because enemies will come around you, that sort of thing. It really works with the style of horror game it is, because I don't think the game would work very well if it was in first person. But maybe that's just a bias from actually playing the game in third person. But enemies will often come up behind the player, which was difficult in the original because you couldn't turn around very fast. Being able to snap around when enemies come up behind you really helps, especially because the remake allows that. And having the extra view around Leon helps add to the tension because while you're fighting you have this feeling that something could be coming up behind you, but oftentimes it's not, but you'll look around anyway. The knife is an extremely useful tool that can be repaired and upgraded at the merchant whenever is needed. It is used for situations that can make fights easier, like sneaking up on enemies, but is very important when you have enemies that fall down and start to try to get back up. You can actually deal with them and finish them off with the knife before they can transform and get back up, because if they do transform, they have extra health and become a nuisance. Usually in the beginning of the game you want to shoot enemies in the head because that will stagger them and you can go for a kick doing extra damage without wasting bullets. But this will become an issue later on when enemies gain their transformation phase, where if you shoot some enemies in the head, they have a chance of spawning the parasite out of their head, which has multiple forms later on in the game, but that parasite is extremely dangerous and does a ton of damage if it hits you. It's usually got the blade arms or the one with the teeth. The game is littered with traps and bombs all over the place, like bear traps and then trip mines that are everywhere. These both can be defused. You can stab the bear trap or defuse the mines on the walls or on the floors, but if you don't, they do a ton of damage. They're also just kind of littered everywhere, especially in the early parts of the village where there's bear traps left and right and are extremely annoying to deal with sometimes. HP can be restored in many ways using herbs or the sprays that you pick up. But to upgrade HP, there's a mechanic where you actually combine the herbs and you need a yellow, red, and green one to truly upgrade your HP, and once combined you can actually use that to increase your maximum HP. The case is an interesting thing because you can actually sort it around. It's a really good storage system and inventory system of the game, which you don't see often in other games, but the case is awesome. You can move stuff around in it and all that. Some people enjoy it so much that there's literally a game you can buy on Steam that is just levels of puzzles where you have to sort the case from RE4 in it. From here I'll start talking about some of the more memorable moments of the game, going through parts of the story. The game starts off very linear, where every area you go to you're just kind of going down a straight corridor until you reach probably one of the most iconic parts in gaming history. You end up reaching the village where the first thing you see is that the villagers have the guy who is driving you here in the first cutscene on a pike, and they end up lighting him on fire, which immediately sets up fear in the player, like what is going on here. The part starts off strong with that, and then shortly after you can sneak around the village and stuff, but you're ultimately going to get seen, or if you manage to make it to a specific house, which only veteran players of the game typically end up getting to that house before anyone sees them, it starts this off anyway. But entering that house, the village fight starts, where every villager is just coming after you. You can enter that house where you'll find the shotgun upstairs as well as a couple grenades and stuff, but
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
then starts one of the most adrenaline-fueled, memorable parts of the area, where the chainsaw dude finally shows up, which is just a guy with a bag over his head and a chainsaw. This guy has a buttload of health, which requires multiple clips, multiple shotgun shots, possibly a couple grenades if you have them. On harder difficulties, almost impossible to kill. As a kid, this was the absolute most terrifying experience, hearing that chainsaw revving and coming towards you, getting louder as it does. You can barricade that building, but it doesn't last long because he'll break through the door and then the enemies will come through the upstairs and on a ladder usually. Once you manage to defeat the chainsaw guy or fight and run, you have to kill a few villagers, but mostly you're on a timer, which after the timer ends up, the weird section happens where the bell will ring and all the villagers will just stop in place. That's where a cutscene will play, having all the villagers just go towards the church while ignoring Leon at this point.
Huh?
La campana.
servir. Al Lord Saddler Todopoderoso.
They end up shutting the door behind them while just staring at Leon, which is absolutely ominous and adds to the strange nature of the villagers, making the player uneasy, which very much sets up the ambience of the game. This part solidified the game as iconic. At that point, you just want to keep playing the game to see what's going on further down the line. I mentioned earlier about their transformations, because from here you'll want to shoot villagers in the head until you get past a certain point where villagers will start to transform and have the tentacles on them, where it's extremely difficult to deal with them sometimes, especially on the harder difficulties where you have not a lot of ammo to deal with them. So it's usually better to just shoot them once and then try to kick instead of shooting them a whole bunch to take their head off, otherwise you may have issues with that. This only happens when the game turns to nighttime, and it becomes a very bad idea to shoot them in the head. The game does a really good job at setting up expectations in the player, such as this one. This sets a fear of the lake right before you head down and realize you actually have to cross it, since the only way to go is on the boat. This creates an uneasy feeling as you collect the gas can from the villagers on the other side of the area, knowing you're going to have to go back and cross that lake anyway, knowing there's something huge in there. The uneasy feeling is warranted as you cross the lake and are greeted by a boss fight. I'm gonna be entirely honest, I hate water, and this boss does me no favors. I'm also going to be honest and say that this boss is absolutely brutal on harder difficulties. Del Lago will sling the boat around into objects, and if you do not dodge them, you're done. They do immense damage. The boat is also wonky to control, so those objects are sometimes hard to dodge, and I've played the game on one of the hardest difficulties, and it usually only takes 3 objects for you to die. You fight him by chucking spears. You can hold the aim button to make the spears go farther and do more damage, but ultimately I think it's just about the amount you throw at him based on what difficulty you're on. Eventually he will go underwater and reappear trying to swallow the boat, which is where you need to throw a spear directly into the thing's mouth to stop it. After some time of throwing spears at Del Lago, he'll eventually go down, causing a cutscene to play where Leon will pass out and wake up on the other side of the lake. The game used the expectation of the people in the boat to set up Del Lago, but it also set up multiple things before you even got to Del Lago, such as these.
Good luck finding someone big enough to use this thing.
The skull and hammer set up an expectation of you questioning what exactly is so big that it can hold the hammer or have that type of skull, which sets up a uneasy expectation as you're going through the areas. After defeating Del Lago, you go across the lake to get the key, and on your way back, you end up in an arena area where a boss fight starts. This fight is where those questions about the hammer and the skull get answered, because this gigantic creature busts through the gate as the other gates close, locking you in there with it. This fight is also brutal, because as you shoot him, you realize the really only way to damage him is the weird tentacle coming out of his back, aka the parasite, which only shows up after you do some shots to him. He's also incredibly fast, he'll like lean down and rush at the player, which is really hard to dodge sometimes and does a crap load. You can use him to break some of the houses or stuff while you're running into them, and they drop items as he does that to help you fight with the fight. The parasite is also hard to hit because he keeps moving around, so the best way to hit it is with the sniper, but as I said, he keeps moving around, which makes it very difficult to hit because it's very small. Alternatively, earlier in the game you may have come across a dog that was being attacked by Mendez, which is trapped in a bear trap. If you save him, he will enter the fight. The dog will jump into the fight. He is a huge help because he'll run up and attack the giant boss by biting its leg, and it will fall over, allowing you to jump on it to use your knife to do extra damage to the parasite, or to just shoot it outright to do extra damage. Eventually, after shooting it a whole bunch, the thing will go down and you'll be free to move on. After you defeat the boss, you head your way back up to the church where you end up rescuing Ashley. Shortly after that, you reach the next memorable part, which is, after crossing the bridge, you end up back at the cabin where you originally had found Luis, where he is there currently. You run in there to hide from the villagers, but it ends up becoming a big defense mission. This part is absolutely adrenaline fueled, where you have 8 to 9 enemies in the cabin at a time trying to kill you. Your goal is to board the bottom windows with the boards you get from killing the enemies. This is incredibly difficult on higher difficulties where resources are slim and one mistake will end the run. After the bottom floor is done, they end up putting a ladder up and coming through the upstairs where Luis will go up, and you will have to follow him up to help fight the enemies up there. You fight them off until one of the big dudes with the sledgehammer busts the downstairs door. He'll come running up the stairs where you have to defeat him there, and once you defeat him, you have to survive for a few more seconds until Ashley runs in to save you and the sequence ends. The part is absolutely nuts and shows how cult-like the town is, following Sadler's every command and will lay their lives down to get you even though it's against their will, since the parasite has taken them over, so in a sense you're just putting them out of their misery.
Alright, come on.
Okay. Leon!
Soul requires cleansing. Come, child.
Ashley, run!
Here is where we find our first cult leader, Mendez. He starts by coming through this gate and bending it to make it to where you can't get back out. This part, you just run from point A to point B until you eventually reach a cabin where we meet our first cult leader boss.
Be careful. Leon!
Cease your pointless struggling. Abandon your body to the will of our God.
You're a shitty missionary. You know that.
Oh, Almighty, grant me the strength to crush your enemies.
Son of a bitch.
Ashley, run!
Okay.
Hasta luego.
God, I thank you for your gift.
You want to get ugly? Let's get ugly.
The thing that Mendez turns into is horrifying. Leon shoots an explosive barrel, and the parasite transforms Mendez into a nasty spinal cord centipede creature. The fight is pretty difficult, but way easier than the previous two, where he'll mostly run at you and try to swipe you in the first phase. But after the second phase, nastily his spinal cord separates from his bottom half and he uses those claws to cling to the ceiling and throw things at you. Usually you just run side to side, but when he picks up the barrels you want to shoot them. Occasionally, he will jump towards the player and use a scorpion-like appendage to stab the player, which is mostly easily dodged because all you have to do is click E. Mostly, you just shoot the barrels out of his hands and use the shotgun when he gets close. Overall, I think he's a good boss fight and sets up the expectations for what the parasite can do to the people. After making your way past Mendez, you meet the next memorable part, which is attempting to enter the castle. This part is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. It's very difficult. It's needlessly difficult, to be honest. Once you get there, there's a bunch of people with crossbows that'll start shooting at you. They're pretty easily dealt with. Just use the sniper or shoot them with the pistol and then run away. A couple of them will drop down to try to chase you or steal Ashley, but that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue are these. These are catapults. For some odd reason, they have a bunch of medieval catapults here, and Capcom thought it was a good idea to make you try to run through it. They fire exploding bombs, which on higher difficulties will almost one-shot you, but the biggest issue is Ashley, because she can only get hit by 2 of them no matter what HP you have upgraded, and no matter what difficulty you're on, so if you're not careful, you will lose anyway. The only way to take down the catapults is to move strategically and find the red barrels next to them, which is sometimes hard because you have to go out in the open to shoot one while another one is shooting at you and enemies are coming at from all sides. In the part, you end up getting on a cannon and firing it at the door to shoot it, but that is impossible if you do not kill the catapults first. Like I said, this part seems needlessly difficult, but I will say it's still a good part of the game with the adrenaline-fueled expectations of the castle. After getting through parts of the castle, you end up in what I consider the worst part of the game, which is where Leon gets locked up in a cage and Ashley ends up having to go out on her own. I bring up this part since it's the only part of the game I really don't like. I don't like this part mostly because it's boring, but on harder difficulties, this part is just plain unfair. The armored soldiers will one-shot you and are incredibly fast, especially on the harder difficulties. Which wouldn't bother me if it wasn't for one part. This part is borderline unfair and annoying, which makes the whole section just unfun. That thing comes up the stairs, and the biggest problem is trying to get around it, and from my footage it doesn't look that bad, but on harder difficulties he will 180 you at a split second and kill you in one shot. Overall, this section just is boring and unfun, and by the time you get back to Leon, you're just kind of annoyed. I mentioned earlier that there was a part that I found a little ridiculous put into this game. This part really doesn't feel like it fits this type of game and reminds me a bit too much of the Donkey Kong 64 kart minigames, and almost plays identical. You ride a physics-defying cart that goes on its own, and you have a pistol with unlimited ammo where people will come in other carts with crossbows. You have to shoot them to get them out of the cart, or to kill them before they can kill you. And then you also have to shoot the barriers and the lane changers to be able to go through this part. A lot of the time you have to click either A or D if you're playing on mouse and keyboard, which will keep the cart from flipping over. Like I said, the cart defies the laws of physics and will just go up ramps with no issue, with no apparent electrical motor or anything. I find this part just kind of outlandish and not really necessary for the game, but it's still fun to play.
And so, I have delivered the girl to you as promised. Do tell our Lord to not forget the loyalty of his servant, Ramon.
Ashley!
Such a fool, Mr. Kennedy. To have been bestowed with Lord Sattler's...
You talk too much.
It failed!
You vulgar!
Utterly uncivilized! Mongrel!
Salazar is one of the better bosses and also one of the easiest. I'll say he's my favorite villain, like I said earlier, because his cocky attitude, and here you finally get to shut him up. You end up shooting him at first, and he goes down and transforms into this nasty squid creature with... squid flower creature, like the front of him's like a flower where he can pop out and shoot acid at you. He fights primarily by shooting that acid or dropping bombs on the ground, which some of them will just sit there until you run over them, which is incredibly annoying on higher difficulties. He tends to stay latched to the walls, but will occasionally jump at you to attack you, which can be kinda easily dodged. You just need to run the opposite direction. The arena is small, making him able to move around quickly to attack you wherever you end up hiding. If you run behind a wall, he'll be there in a matter of seconds. Eventually, with enough damage, he'll fall to the ground and you can stab him, doing massive damage. I'll say the hardest part is not getting annoyed at how much he talks, because he does not shut up during the entire fight. Eventually, you'll overcome him and deal with him for good. After dealing with Salazar, you'll make your way to the final island of the game, where you first end up in what I consider the second worst part of the game, which is the laboratory. You end up going through a laboratory, which is where the Umbrella Corp was originally doing experiments with the parasites, but here is where they left some creatures that are the worst enemy in the entire game, called the Regenerators. When you first meet them in the area, you absolutely cannot kill them. They will just continue to regenerate every bit of damage you do to them. No matter what you do, they end up getting up. You can take their limbs off, you can throw grenades, you completely blow them up, eviscerate them. They will continuously regen that damage, regenerate that health damage, and then just continue to attack you. Eventually, you'll end up in a room where there's 4 of them in vats, and in the back there is a sniper scope that allows you to see the weak points within them. The higher difficulties, the more weak points they have, which makes them the worst enemy in the game in my opinion, also because they move around like they're on drugs. They move crazily, they'll lunge at you, they'll drop to the ground and crawl at you, making the weak points harder to hit, and eventually they will start transforming into these spiked ones that have a hit point that doesn't actually die within one hit. It takes like 3 or 4, and then they'll explode when they die, making them just extremely annoying and my most hated enemy in the entire game.
You've done well to make it this far, rookie. I've prepared a battlefield up ahead. Just for us soldiers. Watered by the blood of generations, hundreds of years. It's the perfect place to put an end to what happened 2 years ago. I've been waiting for you, rookie. Oh, worried about the girl, is that it? That's just like you. You always had poor judgment. But if you think I'm gonna let you out of here alive, you're even more naive than I thought. You can't save her. You can't save anyone.
Give it up, Krauser! Being a lackey for these maniacs won't bring your men back. And what the hell for? Revenge on the government? You think they would want that?
Revenge. You think I'm doing all this for revenge?
Isn't that what this is all about?
See, in that jungle, I had a revelation. The most important thing in this world is pure, unadulterated power. Those Illuminados have given me that.
You know, you were always an asshole. But at least you had some kind of code. Some honor. And look at you now.
Enough reminiscing. Move out and draw fire, soldier!
After getting through the laboratory, you're greeted with Krauser for the final time. Krauser is probably my favorite fight. His first phase is kind of fun and interesting because you're going through what's kind of like a labyrinth of traps and stuff that he has set up where he'll drop down occasionally and attack you. With that, it's best to use the knife or the shotgun when he drops down in front of you, until eventually you do enough damage he'll just throw a flashbang and run away. That first section's fun because you're running around and you have the banter between him and Leon, where Leon's trying to plead with him but he's not listening, which makes it a really good section, an emotional section. Eventually, after doing enough damage, you'll enter an arena where you end up fighting him completely in his first phase, using mostly knives and shotguns, like I said, because he's very fast in that area. After that area, he goes completely nuts and grows a prototype-style blade arm on his left arm, before knocking you down underground, where you run through a short labyrinth until you reach the final arena, where he drops down having another weird like hammer arm on his other arm and knocks you down into this circular arena where the actual fight starts. This is definitely my favorite fight because the music, the location, the bond between him and Leon, where they constantly are arguing at each other, just makes this one of the best fights. It's also extremely fast-paced and action-fueled, as he will run back and forth extremely fast, and you deflect his attacks and shoot him. At some points he'll climb up and then drop back down to do a massive slam, which will hit the entire arena, and the only way to dodge it is to climb up the ladders on the sides and stay up top. Eventually you'll end up defeating him, where he'll just give up and tell Leon to just do what he's got to do and allow Leon to kill him, which it just solidifies him as the best boss in the entire game, in my opinion.
Do what you have to do. That's right. I trained well. Leon.
That you did, Major. That you did.
What was that?
Sorry, bad traffic. One combat chopper compliments the Hunnigan. I'll be back. And I'd show these assholes what we got.
I actually wasn't going to talk much about this section until I played it again, but you end up going through this long section where you have the helicopter come in to try to help you. This section is absolutely nuts and action-fueled with way too many enemies, and There's the dudes with the rocket launchers that just get on your nerves the entire time because if they hit you, it's just almost an insta-kill. But the section is still amazingly fun with the helicopter blowing open paths for you to go through. You have to take out an anti-air gun so the helicopter can go around. At the end of the section, the helicopter comes down and goes to pick you up, and at the moment it looks like you are going to leave until...
Thanks.
When we get out of here, drinks are on me. I know a good bar. Yeah, keep your head down.
Nice and slow. What? Damn it!
After this, the final section of the game starts where the final chapter is, where Sadler just confronts you. You end up on a final platform where there's nowhere else for Sadler to go or you to go, where you end up saving Ada.
Ada! Sadler!
You both end up shooting him and he ends up getting angry and transforming into the final boss. He transforms into a nasty spider creature with a bunch of eyes all over him. This fight is very difficult, especially on harder difficulties. Sadler jumps around, constantly attacking you with his legs, and usually just running at you or trying to jump on you. He'll also spit acid at you, send a bunch of bugs after you, or whatever else you can think of. At some points he will throw stuff at you. The biggest problem is that the eyes have to be shot to knock him down for you to actually be able to damage his weak point, which is the eye in his mouth, which is very difficult to do sometimes because you have to have godlike aim and reflexes to shoot them sometimes because he's moving very fast. Eventually you end up doing enough damage to him that he falls off into the ocean, where it kinda looks like for a second that you've finally beaten him until he comes back up as this gigantic tentacle creature, where you actually get to see the main parasite in the heart of the parasites in between it, where in this section you end up dodging his tentacles back and forth and shooting at the parasite in the middle until In good old Resident Evil fashion, Ada gives you a rocket launcher to fire at him to finish the fight off. The game ends with the short section of you running out where you see that the villagers are now dying because they no longer have the main parasite controlling them, so they just end up dying. You run through this section as the island explodes until you get on a jet ski and right out of the island for good. I'll start now on a key takeaway that I would take away from this game, especially as a Christian. That takeaway would be to avoid cults. The town is definitely a cult from every action they do. They are being controlled by Sadler for their every move, and end up dying in the end after Sadler is defeated. 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 1-4 says, "But there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the sovereign Lord who brought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves. Many will follow their depraved conduct and will bring the way of truth into disrepute. In their greed, these teachers will exploit you with fabricated stories. Their condemnation has been long hanging over them, and their destruction has not been sleeping." Sadler is a prime example of this, using his influence to control the entire time, making them do his bidding. Also, 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 14-17 says, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteous and wicked have in common, or what fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial? Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of the living God, as God has said, 'I will live with them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people.'" Sadler worships an idol. This is Paul strictly warning against that. He speaks of the parasite as God, and so does his lackeys. This game can serve as a warning against cultist activities, seeing as everyone in the town was eventually defeated as Sadler was defeated, realizing that their parasite is not actually a god. Lastly, I would like to bring up, should you play this game, especially as a Christian? In my opinion, the short answer is yes. I love this game. It's absolutely amazing, and I recommend you play it for yourself. But I understand if you have some convictions, and I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong on those. The game is always a good time to play, and like I said before, a good takeaway is to avoid cults if you're wanting to think of it that way. I will say, if you have any convictions, I'm not here to stop you, and I'll bring up a couple here. If you have a strong conviction over violence, absolutely do not play this game, because it is often very brutal, shooting off limbs, stabbing enemies, cutting people, that sort of thing. Again, for me, I see this as fiction, so it doesn't really bother me that much, and I understand that it does bother some people. Another conviction you see would be attacking the townsfolk. One issue that some people may have is the fact that the people just look like townsfolk or just normal people at first, up until parasites start coming out all over the place. This can be a conviction for some people because it just looks too much like you're attacking normal people, but I will say, if you go further on, that becomes very apparent that you're not, and these people are kind of already dead, because they are being controlled at every turn by Sadler and can no longer do anything for themselves. They also constantly attack and try to take over the world, also trying to kill you, because that's their goal with Ashley, is to take over the world by taking over the United States first. I will say keep God in mind when playing games, especially a game like this, and you won't have any issues. This is the same thing I do when I play the game. I keep God in mind and constantly think to myself, make sure that I'm thinking about God and not just playing the game for any other reason other than just entertainment, and not trying to play the game because I enjoy shooting at people or that sort of thing, or want to do that in my own heart. It's a heart thing. Just if you do play the game, just make sure you keep God in mind. Overall, I think this game is a masterpiece, solidifying itself as one of the best action horror games ever made. And if you can play it without having any strong convictions, you really should, and experience it for yourself, because believe me, you won't regret it. Lastly, if you like this video, please hit the like button, and if you want more or want to see more of our content, we come out with a podcast each week, and I will be coming out with more of these videos, and so will my brother. Hit that subscribe button so you can get those and get the notifications. If you have any questions and you're like a newcomer to the belief or want to have more questions, I would recommend going to a couple of these channels. I will link them in the description. a couple being Inspiring Philosophy, one being Mike Winger or Apologetics Roadshow, or Ruslan KD. You can go watch them if you want more. If you have more questions about the faith. As always, I'll say have a blessed day and thank you for watching.